I must say it was very fascinating to hear all these thinkers of the day. And Partha, you have a tremendous catalytic ability apart from being a important reagent yourself. So happy birthday to start. Well, I think I work on a concept called silage. And this is about addressing the disparity in the country, in India. So the idea is to bring in an ecosystem between the knowledge activities in the schools and colleges and such things, activities on the livelihood space where you have artisans training and kind of how their income can go up. And finally, kind of aim at making every village a net exporter, as Mahatma Gandhi used to say. So for me, the reset, as far as India is concerned, is to so-called realize the so-called decentralized governance in its true sense. And I think if we demonstrate a model at a block level of that happening, where the local people can plan their own development and bring to the government authorities that, look, you have provided so much of money, this is how we want to use. And this could be different in different blocks, depending on their need, exactly what you said. So that I think would make a big difference as far as kind of harmonizing the country. There are, of course, aspects at the national governance level which one needs to address. And to my mind, I think our constitution is great, and we need to tweak it a bit, not at the constitutional level, but at the operational level. And one simple thing which I can mention at this point is to kind of, just like we have separation of power between judicial and executive and the political thing, create a separation between bureaucracy and their political masters. Let political masters focus on policy making and let bureaucracy focus on implementation without one interfering into other, and respecting both the domains on the other side. So I think that will solve a lot of implementation and governance problem. And I would imagine also the corruption problem that we have in the country. So, and then finally, I entirely subscribe to the fact that Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy, particularly Sarvodaya, I work with a research foundation, Gandhi Research Foundation, where the attempt is exactly that, to reinterpret Gandhiji, or in your language, to repackage Gandhian philosophy in the modern language, consistent with today's needs. So Partha, it has been great. Thank you for this opportunity. And it always is a kind of a new dose of wisdom that we seem to receive whenever we interact with you. All the best and many happy returns of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've listened intently to what has transpired out here. And I'd like to suggest that what we are looking for in resetting India, the goal is that we have to focus on people, planet, and prosperity. People, planet, and prosperity. Prosperity not just for one segment of society or one or industry or government or what have you, but prosperity in a very broad sense. So the key question that I think we need to address, how do we create public policy in a multicultural democracy? How do we create public policy in a multicultural democracy? I suggest that what we are looking at are grand challenges. And if you are looking at a grand challenge, economic development, sustainable development, any type of development, whether we are thinking in terms of mitigating hunger, whether we are thinking in terms of education, these are grand challenges. And these solutions involve government, industry, and community. Government, industry, and community. We cannot do one without the other. And what we are looking for is to maximize, what we are looking for in a public policy is to maximize the nexus or the benefit that the government feels that they're going to get, industry feels they're going to get, and the community feels that they're going to get. So here is the critical thing. From a technical perspective, I can model benefits for the government, benefits for the industry, and benefits for the community. But the question is, how do we trade these off? If we look at industry, their measure is return on investment. Return on investment, economics, you can do that. But for the government and community, it's a social return on investment. It's a social return on investment. The social return on investment for government is different to the social return on investment for the community. And as we go down to the bottom of the pyramid, the social return on investment will be stratified, totally stratified. So that brings me, I was really pleased to see the Institute of Leadership that has been set up at IIT Kharagpur. So the question that we have to ask is, what is the role of a modern university? And the role of a modern university, in my opinion, is to educate people, not train, educate people to create economic value, social value, and intellectual value. Social value, economic value, and intellectual value. That's the role of a university. It's to empower people to learn how to do this stuff. And then great universities, what they do is they maximize the nexus. They find people like Partha Ghosh and Purang Dang and others who go along and maximize the nexus between the three. They maximize the nexus between the creation of economic value, social value, and intellectual value. And the question that was raised was, what are the competencies that we require? IIT Kharagpur, our focus and competencies are very technical. I suggest in the institute that Partha has set up, we think in terms of what are the non-technical competencies that are necessary for success of a human being, not of an engineer, but of a human being. And I suggest there are 5. One is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Unlearn is very important. 2, the ability to speculate about the future, because if you cannot speculate, you cannot do new things. 3 is the ability to ask questions, because if you cannot ask questions, you cannot figure out what you don't know and what you need to know to move things forward. 4 is to make decisions using incomplete information. This is where risk-taking comes in. If you don't take risks, you keep talking about it, nothing happens. And 5 is the most difficult one, and that deals with critical thinking. And there are 2 types of critical thinking. One is what people have touched upon, thinking within yourself, tying it to your values and saying, this is who I am, this is what needs to happen, this is the right thing to do, and this is what we need to make happen. And the other is external. I look at a report, I look at what it is, I look at what other people have done, and we are very used to that. We say there's a hole here, fix that. But it's doing these 2 things that are necessary. It's the internal critical thinking, which is anchored in your values, religion for some people, spirituality for somebody else, but it's your values. And these values can come from any religion, whether it's Islam, whether it's Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, it doesn't matter. These are your values, what you believe your role in society is. And that brings me to the last point. Just like Gopal has 5 points, I have 5 points. That's Atmanirbhar Bharat. I think Atmanirbhar Bharat is a phenomenal construct. It's a phenomenal construct. We need to be self-sufficient. So I want to just touch upon one aspect. Atmanirbhar Bharat started with the idea of manufacture in India. And you touched upon hardware thinking and software thinking, Gopal. And somebody else touched upon nutrition. Coming from the engineering perspective, from the design perspective, I think what we have to think in terms of is expanding the manufacture in India construct to the design in India construct. Because then what happens, you design in India, which is the intellectual power, the software power that Gopal touched upon, and implement that. That is the manufacturing domain in which you are doing. So these are the 5 points that I want to make. One is we have to focus on public policy in a democracy so that we develop as a nation in terms of people, planet, and prosperity for all, not just for one group or the other. Grand challenges involve solutions, must involve government, industry, and community. And for that, we have to figure out return on investment and defining social return on investment for government and community. 3, the role of a university that maximizes the nexus between economic, social, and intellectual value. 4 are the non-technical competencies that we need to empower our young engineers at the IITs and others at IIT to pick up. And the 5th is Atmanirbhar Bharat that goes beyond make in India to design in India, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Partha and gentlemen. I'm honored to be on this panel. Hardly qualified to recommend ways that India could move ahead in the future, although I'll share with you my thoughts. But let me start by wishing Partha a happy birthday. Both Partha and my wife have a birthday today, so 2 very special people are on my mind. Partha and I met in 2004 and have worked together since then. We're in touch several times a week by phone, by Zoom, or email. And I continue to learn a great deal from my great friend and colleague, Partha. So let me share just a few thoughts from what I gathered in this excellent conversation, and in part from Partha's book, which I'm still reading. You know, as an overarching philosophy for India or for any place, my suggestion would be create an environment where each individual can realize their full potential. And that environment can be created locally, regionally, nationally. I learned this as a young man when I joined Polaroid Corporation in 1970. Polaroid Corporation was founded by Edwin Land, one of the great entrepreneurs and business people of the 20th century, a great man. He's known mostly for the formation of the foundation of Polaroid and instant photography, but that's just the tip of the iceberg of his accomplishments. As an 18-year-old, he had the idea on how to form synthetic polarizer. Prior to this time, polarizing material only existed in nature, in mica. Today, every one of us on this panel have on our person polarizing filters in our phones and elsewhere. That came from Edwin Land. Also, he discovered the Retinex theory of how the eye forms color. Also, he was an advisor to a technical advisor to 7 US presidents, and the list goes on and on. He's also a holder of over 500 US patents, making him the 3rd most prolific patent writer in US history. So it's this man, Edwin Land, in forming Polaroid, that had as one of the aims, creating an environment where people can realize their full potential. As a result of this, it attracted people like me when I was a young man to spend 32 years there. And it was a company that was both loved and admired for its 65 years on this planet. So that's my foundation. That's where I start. Now, when I think about this, I say to myself, and I think about the condition in the world today, which so many people have commented on, I think with great accuracy. When I think about the world today, I go back and I reflect on the fact that nobody is born wanting to hurt somebody. wanting to be mean-spirited. This happens as a result typically of one's environment. So therefore, why can't we create an environment where when someone is born and as they develop, it's love, it's respect for the human being, it's respect for each other that guides us, okay? And that's where I have hope, because this can happen. This is happening. And the kinds of institutes that my friend Partha has formed, I'm so impressed by the institute that he has formed. And I say, well, why can't you have 10 institutes like this in India, 100 institutes eventually, 1,000? Why can't you take role models like Partha? There are so many bright Indian people and successful Indian people around the world. So many, some were noted who are at the very top level, running IBM, running Microsoft, running Google. And then beneath that, there's thousands more. And in my classroom over the years, my brightest students frequently are Indian students, and I love interacting with them. Why can't we unleash all this talent that's around the world and get the Indians around the world to come back and to contribute as role models or in any other way that they can, in any other way? Now, a couple of other things, and then I'll stop because we're approaching 12 o'clock. I think in my notes here, I think education is so important, whether regionally, locally, to move anybody, to move any country to the next level. And that was already commented on. Of course, economics is important. A middle class is something that doesn't spontaneously form. A middle class needs help, needs nurturing, whether it be from economics, whether it be from government programs. But you need to create a middle class, which I think is missing in India. I think you need economics, you need government programs, you need nurturing, and that should be thought through. You need role models, like I've already mentioned. My final point is that I think in India in particular, what you need to do is to leapfrog in terms of technological innovation. And let me just summarize a couple of thoughts on that topic. There's a futurist, Peter Diamandis. You may know him of his work, and he's come up with something he calls the 6 Ds for digital transformation. And I'll try to play them back as best as I can remember. The first is when technologies become digitized, we can use, of course, computers to manage them. Now, once we start doing that, the next D is deceptive, because we now are facing exponential growth in technology. And as all of you know, since many trends in technology were already referred to, in the beginning, changes are almost imperceptible, whether it's AI, whether it's genomics, you name it, whether it's robotics. The changes are almost imperceptible until a point is reached, an inflection point, and then the changes become exponential. And if you're not riding that curve and aware of that curve and speculating about the future, if that's not happening, you're going to get into trouble. So get ahead of that curve. The third D is disruptive. In other words, the further development of an exponential technology can obsolete the previous standard, hence the leapfrogging that I referred to. And it can replace it in both cost and performance. Next, he talks about dematerialized. In other words, products that were large can now fit where? In our pockets or on our purses. Small sensors paired with digitization can eliminate single-use physical devices. Miniaturization. And the fifth D he talks about is demonetized. In other words, high-resolution cameras and, say, GPS systems, for example, are no longer prohibitively expensive. And they reside on our phones, on our mobile phones. And the cost of producing software is so much cheaper than the physical version of it. And economies of scale dramatically reduce costs. And then finally, democratize, the 6th D. Diamandis talks about products, services, and information are now readily accessible to almost anyone, And a low-cost phone plus an internet connection really is all you need. And so in the next few years, the entire globe, everybody is going to be able to connect to the internet. So to conclude, how can India ride these waves? How can India harness these changes that are all around us and are inevitable? It's not maybe they'll happen, they are happening. So with that, I've gone on longer than I wanted to, but I thought I'd share just a few thoughts into this wonderful discussion that I was a part of. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. First of all, of course, the real guy in the center of all this is Partha. He not only wrote a book for all of us as to what happened in the first 75 years, but he went one step further, and all his experience and all his knowledge and wisdom, he digested everything into this new book, which is Towards 100, India Towards 100 Reset. And really, I would really request all the learned audience to find time to go through that book in detail. He has actually laid out a fantastic path for all of, especially the people in India and the leadership in India to, it's like a ready reckoner. Having said that, I'd like to make one or two points, which is my personal observation, because a lot of panelists have come out with very good observations. And I have been in the social sector now for 30 years. Before that, I was in the corporate sector for 30 years. So I've had a chance of seeing what is happening at the ground level as well as at the corporate level. So my observation was this, that after the Second World War, the most developed countries of the world, they started pumping in arms and ammunition to the least developed countries of the world, whether it was Africa, South America, Central America, Asia, Middle East. They never pumped in education, So that had its huge problems. Even today, the amount of money which is spent on armaments, as if we are going to, we're expecting some aliens from outer space. All these armaments are meant to destroy humanity. These armaments are not meant to safeguard this planet. These armaments are really meant to destroy each other. And a lot of money is going into this. I'll tell you why I'm giving you this example, because I've been working with Professor Muhammad Yunus of Bangladesh for the last 14 years. And he has a global summit on social business once a year somewhere in the world. And I've attended 11 of those 13 conclaves. And in one of those, he had asked me to speak, to give my sort of observations as to why the world is not progressing. And, we were about 1,200 people from 50 countries. And all of them were in the social sector. Some was in education, some was in healthcare, some was in whatever, different aspects of social subjects. And we made some observations which really startled the audience. We said that, listen, today you have tax havens, because Sam and others talked of unbalance, disparity. Now, if you're going to allow tax havens in this world in 2022, there's going to be a lot of upheaval on this planet. And somehow we don't want to talk about it. I mean, if you look at I'll give you one example. Look at Great Britain. They've got Isle of Man, they've got Guernsey. I'm sure all the members of parliament have their accounts there. But it's outside the purview of the Parliament of UK, So these are the, it's like putting your head in the sand and not looking what's happening. So I personally feel that we've got to, first of all, get rid of all these tax havens. This is creating a huge unbalance in the society. The other thing which I thought I'll just mention in passing is, again, going back to the amount of money which is going into armaments. Because, we calculated that even if 10% of that money, which is being pumped into armaments, if it could be diverted to education and healthcare, this whole planet would be a very different place to live, which I don't think will happen because, today, political reasons, people want to conquer the world on their own. And this is the tragedy, of this planet. We have just one planet. We don't have an extra planet where we can run to, although I know people are talking about going to Mars and all, but imagine sending 7 or 8 or 10 billion people to Mars. It's absolutely ridiculous, And so this is something which is not discussed. Unfortunately, I've attended number of international seminars all over the world, right from Japan to USA to Europe, Middle East and Southeast Asia. None of the so-called leaders of this world wants to discuss because they've got an ulterior motive of getting rich, making big bucks, I mean, you look at today the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Instead of trying to talk of peace, various countries are pumping in armaments into Ukraine so that they can fight and continue to fight forever. So this is a tragedy which I think needs to be addressed. The other aspect, coming back to the good work which Partha and his team have done of starting the Leadership Academy in IIT Kharagpur. You see, right now we are trying to address the students, and really speaking, the students are so busy with their normal studies. I mean, it could be engineering in IIT, it could be in medical schools, it could be in law, it could be in commerce, any subject. They really don't have the time, or they are not able to appreciate the importance of leadership, not because they don't want to, but they don't have the time, So one of the suggestions which our team has suggested to Partha, and I think he is going to definitely implement it in the near future. You see, we want people from the chambers of commerce, we want people from the management associations, we want people from the National HRD Network, the Indian Society of Training and Development, and the Educational Promotional Society of India. Why I'm saying? Because there the youngsters are actually working. I mean, their knowledge of college or university, they realize it's not enough. Because there they have to implement, they have to solve the day-to-day problems which they face on a daily basis. So if we can rope in these 4 or 5 organizations also to join us, we will have youngsters who are looking for answers on leadership. You see, because they have been thrown into the wild. When I say wild, I mean they've been thrown into the corporate world. Either they've started their own businesses or they are working for companies, and then they realize that knowledge which they had in their college or university is not enough to answer their problems or to solve their problems. So I think once we can get a bigger group of people who are actually in real life, and when I mean real life, I mean actually outside the university, outside the college, I think it will have a completely different flavor as far as the Leadership Academy is concerned. It will really ramp up the response 10 times or 100 times. And of course, they will have a lot of answers for the nation. The last thing I want to mention is that, unfortunately, as far as India is concerned, it's only when Atal Bihari Vajpayee became the Prime Minister, he realized that education is not a serious subject in the country. So he brought in Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan sometime in 2000, early 2000. And then with the new government, with Modi ji as the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Skills Development and Entrepreneurship started only in 2014. And last but not the least, the National Education Policy was launched only in July 2020. That means we have lost 75 years diddling daddling here and there, and we have not been able to empower the human resources of our country in the way they should have been empowered. Fortunately, we hope and pray that now we have a lot of catch up to do. And I think basically, as Partha has mentioned in passing and also very emphatically, that the Vedic philosophy, the philosophies of the East, which are really everlasting and they are omnipresent indirectly or in our consciousness, they need to be brought into focus, because eventually it is a philosophy, the Indian philosophy of Sanatana Dharma, which is the universal philosophy of life. Somehow it has to creep in, and that will only creep in with proper education and consciousness of the human resources of our country. Thank you very much.